As Catholics, it can sometimes feel like we are going mad. Or rather, that we are some of the very few sane ones in a mad, mad world. You could be forgiven for having this attitude. After all, the world is becoming an increasingly strange and bizarre place. And not only because we appear to be going through some kind of one of these cultural, political, worldview realignments or turnings, as they sometimes get called by historians. It just seems that as the world grows further away from God, the stranger it gets. Madness is a normal thing, cloaked in language of acceptance and the rest. It is a mad, mad world. And here we have G.K. Chesterton on some insights into this phenomenon that I think will hit pretty close to home for many of you. It's an excerpt from his work, A Miscellany of Men, published in 1912. The Mad Official. Going mad is the slowest and dullest business in the world. I have very nearly done it more than once in my boyhood, and so have nearly all my friends, born under the general doom of mortals, but especially of moderns. I mean the doom that makes a man come almost to the end of thinking before he comes to the first chance of living. But the process of going mad is dull, for the simple reason that a man does not know that it is going on. Routine and literalism and a certain dry-throated earnestness and mental thirst, these are the very atmosphere of morbidity. If once the man could become conscious of his madness, he would cease to be a man. He studies certain texts in Daniel or cryptograms in Shakespeare through monstrously magnifying spectacles, which are on his nose night and day. If once he could take off the spectacles, he would smash them. He deduces all his fantasies about the sixth seal or the Anglo-Saxon race from one unexamined and invisible first principle. If he could once see the first principle, he would see that it is not there. This slow and awful self-hypnotism of error is a process that can occur not only with individuals, but also with whole societies. It is hard to pick out and prove, that is why it is hard to cure. But this mental degeneration may be brought to one test, which I truly believe to be a real test. A nation is not going mad when it does extravagant things, so long as it does them in an extravagant spirit. Crusaders not cutting their beards till they found Jerusalem. Jacobins calling each other Harmodius and Epaminondas when their names were Jacques and Jules. These are wild things, but they are done in wild spirits at a wild moment. But whenever we see things done wildly but taken tamely, then the state is growing insane. For instance, I have a license to own a personal implement of self-defense. For all I know, this would logically allow me to squeeze off 59 enormous pieces of artillery day and night in my back garden. I should not be surprised at his man doing it, for it would be great fun, but I should be surprised at the neighbors putting up with it, and regarding it as an ordinary thing merely because it might happen to fulfill the letter of my license. Or again, I have a dog license, and I might have the right, for all I know, to turn 10,000 wild dogs loose in Buckinghamshire. I should not be surprised if the law were like that, because in modern England there is practically no law to be surprised at. I should not be surprised even at the man who did it, for a certain kind of man, if he lived long under the English landlord system, might do anything. But I should be surprised at the people who consented to stand it. I should, in other words, think the world a little mad if the incident were received in silence. Now, things every bit as wild as this are being received in silence every day. All strokes slip on the smoothness of a polished wall. All blows fall soundless on the softness of a padded cell. For madness is a passive as well as an active state. It is a paralysis, a refusal of the nerves to respond to the normal stimuli, as well as unnatural stimuli. There are commonwealths plainly distinguished here and there in history, which pass from prosperity to squalor, or from glory to insignificance, or from freedom to servitude, not only in silence, but with serenity. The face still smiles while the limbs, literally and loathsomely, are dropping from the body. These are people that have lost the power of astonishment at their own actions. When they give birth to a fantastic fashion or a foolish law, they do not start or stare at the monster they have brought forth. They have grown used to their own unreason. Chaos is their cosmos, and the whirlwind is the breath of their nostrils. These nations are really in danger of going off their heads en masse, becoming one vast vision of imbecility, with toppling cities and crazy countrysides all dotted with industrialist lunatics. One of these countries is modern England. Now here is an actual instance, a small case of how our social conscience really works. Tame in spirit, wild in result, blank in realization, a thing without the light of mind in it. I take this paragraph from a daily paper. Quote, at Epping yesterday, Thomas Woolburn, a Lambourne laborer, and his wife were summoned for neglecting their 5 children. Dr. Alpin said he was invited by the inspector of the NSPCC to visit defendant's cottage. Both the cottage and the children were dirty. The children looked exceedingly well in health, but the conditions would be serious in case of illness. Defendants were stated to be sober. The man was discharged. The woman, who said she was hampered by the cottage having no water supply and that she was ill, was sentenced to 6 weeks' imprisonment. The sentence caused surprise, and the woman was removed crying, "Lord, save me." I know no name for this but Chinese. It calls up the mental picture of some archaic and changeless English Eastern court, in which men with dried faces and stiff ceremonial costumes perform some atrocious cruelty to the accompaniment of formal proverbs and sentences of which the very meaning has been forgotten. In both cases, the only thing in the whole farrago that be called real is the wrong. If we apply the lightest touch of reason to the whole Epping prosecution, it dissolves into nothing. I here challenge any person in his 5 wits to tell me what that one was sent to prison for. Either it was for being poor, or it was for being ill. Nobody could suggest, nobody will suggest, nobody, as a matter of fact, did suggest that she had committed any other crime. The doctor was called in by Society for the Prevention of Bad Things to Kids. Was this woman guilty of this? Not in the least. Did the doctor say she was guilty of this? Not in the least. Was there any evidence even remotely bearing on the sin of cruelty? Not a rap. The worst that the doctor could work himself up to saying was that though the children were exceedingly well, the conditions would be serious in case of illness. If the doctor will tell me any conditions that would be comic in case of illness, I shall attach more weight to his argument. Now this is the worst effect of modern worry. The mad doctor has gone mad. He is literally and practically mad, and still is he quite literally and practically a doctor. The only question is the old one, Cos docebit ipsum docterum. Now, cruelty to the most young is an utterly unnatural thing, instinctively accursed of earth and heaven, but neglect of them is a natural thing, like neglect of any other duty. It is a mere difference of degree that divides extending arms and legs in calisthenics and extending them on the rack. It is a mere difference of degree that separates any operation from purposeful infliction of pain. The thumb screw can easily be called manicure. Being pulled about by wild horses can easily be called massage. The modern problem is not so much what people will endure as what they will not endure. But I fear I interrupt. The boiling point is boiling, and the 10th Mandarin is already reciting the 17th series principles and the 53 virtues of the sacred emperor. In other words, more than a century ago, G.K. Chesterton had said the world had gone mad. You will notice, if you're familiar with his writings, especially on social questions, that this was an observation of his that he carried throughout all of his writings. On the implementation of Catholic social teaching, he wrote extensively. And it was always that the world had gone mad, and that the social doctrine of the church, that is, the ownership of private property in as many hands as possible, meaning as many individuals as possible would own private property and would engage in their own businesses. And people would become community-focused again, not relying on distant politicians and distant courts to handle their problems for them. But that was a cure for madness. And in other articles of his, in other workings of his, he rooted this in faith in Christ and membership in his church. And this is the world the church wants to dialogue with today. But not to call to conversion, but to help bring peace. Some ephemeral peace that does not involve conversion. Or so it seems. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps, so to sharing this on social media, that helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.